I was standing at the counter of our little post office on Bull Street, picking up 5 packages addressed to my daughter-in-law, when Hattie Monroe grabbed my wrist hard enough to leave a mark. She pulled me into the back room, set those packages on a metal table, and whispered, "Honey, burn these before she finds out you touched them. That girl's been running 2 lives out of this post office, and your boy's about to pay for both." I didn't know it then, but Hattie had watched her own son die because she'd stayed quiet once before. This time, she wasn't staying quiet, and neither was I. But let me back up, because this story didn't start in that post office. It started 20 months earlier, on the happiest day I'd had since Gerald died. My name is Carol Weston. I'm 62 years old. I taught 3rd grade at Marsh Point Elementary in Savannah, Georgia, for 35 years before I retired. I raised one son, Marcus, in a house my husband Gerald built with his own hands on Habersham Street. Gerald passed 5 years ago, left me that house, a magnolia tree he planted the day I told him I was expecting, and a hole in my life I thought nothing could fill. Then Marcus brought Jenna home. She walked into my kitchen on a Sunday afternoon in February, and I swear the room got warmer. She had this laugh, the kind that makes you lean in, the kind that makes you think everything's going to be all right. She brought peach cobbler, homemade, from scratch. She called me Mom Carol before the first slice was gone, and when she hugged me goodbye at the door, she held on a beat longer than she needed to, like she meant it. I loved her immediately. 35 years of reading children teaches you to spot who's pretending and who's real. Jenna felt real. 6 months later, they married in Forsyth Park. October light through the live oaks, Spanish moss swaying like lace curtains. Marcus looked at her the way Gerald used to look at me, like the rest of the world had gone quiet. I sat in the front row and thanked God for giving my son what I'd had. That was 20 months ago. 20 months of Sunday dinners and peach cobbler. 20 months of believing I understood the woman my son married. I understood nothing. It was an ordinary Monday in mid-October when Hattie Monroe rearranged my entire world. The air still held summer's warmth, but the light had shifted to that golden autumn angle that makes Savannah look like a painting. Jenna had called the night before asking me to pick up her packages. "Mom Carol, I'm swamped with this work trip preparation. Would you mind grabbing my mail tomorrow? There should be a few boxes." Of course I said yes. That's what family does. The Bull Street post office hasn't changed in decades. Brass fixtures gone green with age. A wobbling ceiling fan. The smell of ink and brown paper, and something faintly sweet, like the pralines Mrs. Beaumont sells from her cart outside. Hattie Monroe had worked the counter for 30 years. She knew every regular by name, remembered birthdays, slipped lollipops to children. 58 years old, silver streaking through dark hair, reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. The kind of woman who calls everyone honey and means it. I'd never once seen Hattie afraid. Not during the flood of 2019. Not when that man came in screaming about a lost package and she talked him down like she was soothing a child. Hattie Monroe did not rattle. Until that Monday. I was signing the pickup forms when Hattie glanced at the names on the packages. Something in her face changed. A tightening around the eyes. A half-second pause in her hand. If I hadn't spent 35 years reading faces across a classroom, I would have missed it. I didn't miss it. She handed me the receipt, smiled, everything normal. Then she leaned across the counter, her voice dropping to barely a breath. "Carol, don't leave yet. Come to the back. I need to show you something." I followed her through the employees-only door, down a narrow hallway that smelled like toner and cardboard, into a break room with a metal table and fluorescent lights that buzzed like trapped insects. She closed the door. Locked it. Set all 5 packages between us. And Hattie Monroe, the woman who'd never been afraid of anything, looked at me with terror in her eyes and said the words that split my life in 2. "Honey, burn these before she finds out you touched them. That girl's been running 2 lives out of this post office, and your boy's about to pay for both." I stared at her. "Hattie, these are just Jenna's deliveries. She asked me to pick them up. I know what she asked you. Hattie's voice was steady but low, the kind of voice people use in hospitals and churches. Carol, I've been sorting that girl's mail for 2 years. I know what comes in under her name, and I know what comes in under the other one. The other one? Look at the label, Carol. Really look. The first package was addressed to Jenna Weston, but the second, the third, the fourth, and the fifth were addressed to someone I'd never heard of. Jenna Richardson. Same address. Same handwriting on the customs forms. Different name. I don't understand. I whispered, though something deep in my chest had already begun to understand. Something that had been sleeping for 20 months was waking up. Hattie placed both hands flat on the table. I've seen this before. The 2 names. The packages from out of state. The legal documents hidden inside bubble wrap. I've seen this exact pattern. She paused. Last time, I didn't say anything. Told myself it wasn't my business. Told myself I was imagining things. She met my eyes. Someone died, Carol. Someone I loved more than anything in this world died because I stayed quiet. The fluorescent lights buzzed. The packages sat between us like unexploded ordnance. I thought about Marcus. His kind eyes. The way he trusted everyone. Because Gerald and I raised him to believe the world was good. I thought about Jenna's peach cobbler and her long hugs and the way she called me Mom Carol like it was the most natural thing in the world. Then I picked up the packages. All 5. I'm taking these home. And I'm opening every single one. Hattie nodded once. Good. And Carol? I stopped at the door. When you see what's inside, don't call your son. Don't call her. Come back to me first. Promise me. I promise. I walked into the October sunshine with 5 packages stacked in my arms, and the world looked exactly the same. Same golden light through the live oaks. Same Spanish moss swaying. Same sweet pralines from Mrs. Beaumoncoeur. But I knew, the way you know when a storm is coming before the sky changes, that nothing would ever be the same again. I sat in my driveway for 10 minutes before I could carry those packages inside. 10 minutes watching the sunlight move across the dashboard, listening to the engine tick as it cooled, trying to find a single innocent explanation for why my daughter-in-law received mail under a name I'd never heard. I couldn't find one. The first package was addressed to Jenna Weston, my daughter-in-law. The second was addressed to Jenna Richardson. Same handwriting. Same address. 2 different women living in my son's house. I needed to understand which one was real. I carried those 5 packages through my front door like they were made of glass. Set them on the kitchen table under the overhead light. The one Gerald installed the year Marcus started kindergarten because he said a family needs a bright kitchen. The house was quiet. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the tick of the hallway clock Gerald's mother gave us for our wedding. Ordinary sounds on an ordinary Monday evening. Except nothing about this evening was ordinary anymore. I made coffee first. Not because I wanted it, but because I needed something to do with my hands while I worked up the courage to open the first box. The mug I grabbed without thinking was the one Jenna gave me last Christmas. World's Best Mom Carol. Painted in her handwriting, with a little magnolia blossom underneath. She'd made it herself at one of those pottery studios downtown. I'd cried when I unwrapped it. Cried because no one had called me Mom since Gerald died, and hearing it again felt like sunlight breaking through after 5 years of clouds. I set the mug down, picked up the box cutter, started with the package, addressed to Jenna Richardson. Inside, wrapped in brown paper and sealed with clear tape, was a manila envelope thick with documents. Legal documents. I pulled them out and spread them across the table the way I used to spread student papers for grading. Carefully. Methodically. The teacher in me needed order. Even when the world was falling apart. The first document was a certificate of ownership for a condominium in Miami, Florida. 2 bedrooms, ocean view, purchased 14 months ago through something called Coastal Living LLC. The listed owner was Jenna Richardson. Not Jenna Weston. Not my son's wife. Someone else entirely. Someone with a different last name, a Miami address, and enough money to buy waterfront property in a city 1,500 miles from the kitchen where I was standing. 14 months ago. Marcus and Jenna had been married 6 months by then. 6 months of Sunday dinners at my table. 6 months of Jenna calling me Mom Carol. 6 months of a woman I thought I knew purchasing real estate in another state under a name my son had never heard. My hands were steady when I opened the second package. Steadier than they should have been. I think some part of me already knew that whatever I found next would be worse. 35 years of parent-teacher conferences had taught me that the first bad grade is never the real problem. The real problem is always hiding behind it, waiting. The second package contained a United States passport. I opened it, and Jenna's face stared back at me. Same eyes. Same smile. Same woman who'd sat in my kitchen 3 days ago telling me about a recipe she'd found for Gerald's favorite cornbread. But the name beside the photograph wasn't Jenna Weston. It was Jenna Richardson. Date of birth, same. Place of birth listed as Jacksonville, Florida, not Atlanta, Georgia, where she'd told us she grew up. Jacksonville, not Atlanta. I set the passport down gently, the way you set down something fragile, something that might shatter if you handled it wrong. Then I opened the third package. This one was smaller. Inside, a leather wallet I'd never seen. I unzipped it, and 3 credit cards fanned out like a hand of poker. Different banks, different states, none of them bearing the name Weston. All of them issued to Jenna Richardson, with billing addresses I didn't recognize. One in Jacksonville, Florida. One in Charleston, South Carolina. One in Birmingham, Alabama. 3 cards across 3 states. A constellation of lies mapped in plastic and magnetic strips. I closed my eyes. 35 years of teaching means you learn to control your face. You learn to smile when a child tells you their dog died and their parents are divorcing and they didn't do their homework because they were crying all night. You learn to hold it together so they don't have to. I'd held it together through Gerald's diagnosis, through his treatment, through the funeral, through 5 years of sleeping alone in a bed built for 2. I could hold it together now, except my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I looked at the kitchen wall where Marcus and Jenna's wedding photo hung in the frame I'd chosen. Forsyth Park. October light. Spanish moss. Her hand in his. Both of them smiling like the future was something you could trust. I'd taken that photograph myself. Stood there with tears streaming down my face because my boy had found his person. The way I'd found Gerald. The way you pray your children will find somebody who makes the world make sense. The woman in that photograph had a Miami condo I'd never heard of. A passport with a different hometown. Credit cards scattered across 3 states, like escape routes planned in advance. Maybe there's an explanation, I told myself. Maybe Richardson is a maiden name. Maybe the condo is an investment. Maybe the passport is old, from before the wedding, some bureaucratic overlap that just hasn't been corrected yet. Maybe. But 35 years of reading children teaches you something else too. It teaches you that when a student starts a sentence with maybe, what follows is almost never the truth. Maybe is the word people use when they're building a bridge between what they know and what they wish they didn't. I knew. Somewhere beneath the maybes and the excuses and the desperate hope that this was all a misunderstanding, I knew. The woman who called me Mom Carol, who baked me peach cobbler, who held my hand through my hip surgery and cried at my son's wedding, that woman had a second life, a life with different names on different documents in different states, a life my son knew nothing about. And there were still 2 packages left to open. I stared at them sitting on the table, the brown paper catching the overhead light. Then I stared at the wedding photograph on the wall, the girl smiling in that frame, holding my son's hand under the Spanish moss. She was a stranger, and she was still sleeping in my son's bed tonight. I reached for the 4th package. 2 left. Whatever was inside, I needed to see it. Not because I wanted to, because I was a mother, and a mother doesn't look away when her child is in danger. Not even when looking means watching everything she believed come apart at the seams. The fourth package was lighter than the others. Thinner. The kind of weight that tricks you into thinking it can't hold anything important. I've learned not to trust that feeling. In 35 years of teaching, the thinnest folders in my filing cabinet always held the worst news. Suspension reports, custody changes, letters from parents explaining why their child wouldn't be coming back to school. I slit the tape with my box cutter and pulled out a bundle of bank statements held together by a rubber band. 3 different banks, 3 different account numbers, all under the name Jenna Richardson. The balances were modest. A few thousand here, a few thousand there. But the transaction histories told a different story. Transfers in, transfers out. Amounts moving between accounts like water flowing through a system designed to make the current impossible to trace. Deposits from Coastal Living LLC, the same company listed on the Miami condo paperwork. Withdrawals to accounts I didn't recognize. Numbers that led to institutions I'd never heard of, with routing codes that didn't match any domestic bank I knew. I'm not a financial expert. I taught 8-year-olds how to read chapter books and add fractions. But I know what it looks like when someone's hiding money. Gerald was a real estate attorney for 40 years. He used to bring his case files home on Friday evenings, spread them across this same kitchen table, and walk me through the puzzles he was solving. Shell companies. Layered transactions. Paper trails designed to lead nowhere. He said the trick was always the same. Follow the money, Carol. It doesn't matter how many walls they build around it. Money always leaves footprints. Jenna's footprints were all over these statements, and they led in every direction except toward my son. I set the statements aside and reached for the 5th package. The last one. The one that would either give me answers or break me. I could feel the choice in my hands, the weight of knowing versus the comfort of ignorance. For one selfish moment, I considered putting it back in the box, taping it shut, driving it to Jenna's doorstep, and pretending I never looked. Going back to Sunday dinners and peach cobbler and the beautiful lie that my daughter-in-law loved my son, then I thought about Hattie's face in that back room. The trembling hands. The terror. Someone died. I opened the 5th package. Inside was a single envelope. Cream-colored, expensive stationery. The kind lawyers use when they want you to take them seriously. The return address was a law firm in Jacksonville, Florida. Castellano and Price. Attorneys at law, specializing in family law and asset protection. I pulled out the letter and read it twice, because the first time my eyes refused to process what they were seeing. Dear Miss Richardson, this letter confirms the successful filing of your petition for dissolution of marriage in the state of Florida. Case number 24-7731. All asset transfer documentation has been prepared per your instructions. As discussed, we recommend completing the domestic filing prior to your relocation to ensure maximum protection of transferred assets. Please confirm your preferred timeline for finalization. We remain at your service. Dissolution of marriage. My daughter-in-law was divorcing my son. Secretly, through a law firm 1,500 miles away, under a name he'd never heard, in a state where he had no idea paperwork was being filed on his behalf. And they weren't just ending the marriage, they were transferring assets, moving money, building legal walls around whatever Jenna had already taken and whatever she planned to take next. All asset transfer documentation has been prepared per your instructions. Per your instructions. 3 words that told me everything. This wasn't a woman who'd stumbled into trouble. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a maiden name mix-up or an old passport that needed updating. This was a plan, executed with precision, funded by shell companies and offshore accounts, supported by lawyers who specialized in making people disappear with other people's money. My son's money, my family's money, Gerald's money. I reached for my phone, pulled up Marcus's number. My thumb hovered over the call button. I could end this right now. 1 phone call. Marcus, your wife has a fake passport and a Miami condo, and she's secretly divorcing you through a Florida law firm. 15 seconds. That's all it would take. But 35 years in a classroom teaches you to think 3 moves ahead. If I called Marcus, he'd confront Jenna. That's who he is. Gerald raised him honest, raised him direct. He'd look her in the eye and ask her to explain. And Jenna Richardson, the woman with escape routes in 3 states and lawyers who specialize in making assets disappear, she wouldn't explain. She'd run. She'd vanish into whatever life she'd built in Miami or Jacksonville or wherever the next identity was waiting. And she'd take everything with her. The money, the evidence, the chance of ever holding her accountable for whatever she was planning. I put the phone down. The hallway clock ticked. Gerald's clock. Steady and patient. The way he was. The way he taught me to be. I could hear his voice in the rhythm of it. The thing he told me every time I came home frustrated from a difficult parent conference or a school board meeting that went sideways. Patience wins, Carol. Every time. Don't react. Plan. Then move. Don't react. Plan. Then move. I sat at that kitchen table until 2 in the morning. The coffee went cold, then room temperature, then I forgot it existed. I read every document 3 times. I organized them the way I organized lesson plans. By category. By timeline. By severity. I made notes on a yellow legal pad, Gerald's brand, the same kind he used for 40 years. 1 column for facts, 1 column for questions, 1 column for what I needed to do next. The facts column filled fast. The questions column filled faster. But the action column had only 1 entry, written in handwriting that didn't shake even though the rest of me wanted to. Go back to Hattie. Hattie knew something. More than she'd told me. The way she'd said I've seen this before wasn't a guess. It was testimony. She'd watched this pattern play out. The 2 names. The packages. The legal documents. And she'd watched it end in death. She knew what came next, because she'd already lived through it. I needed to know what she knew. I stacked the documents neatly, slid them back into their envelopes, and locked everything in the filing cabinet in Gerald's old study, the one with the combination lock he'd installed himself. Then I washed my coffee mug, the one Jenna made me. World's best mom, Carol, with the little magnolia blossom. I washed it carefully, dried it, and put it back on the shelf. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle around me the way it always does after midnight. The small creaks and sighs of a structure holding itself together. Gerald built this house to last. He always said a good foundation can survive anything. I used to believe that about families too. The ceiling fan turned slow circles in the dark. Outside, a mockingbird sang its confused midnight song, the one they sing when they can't tell the difference between moonlight and morning. I knew exactly how that bird felt. By 6 the next morning, I was dressed, keys in hand, standing at my front door. The sun wasn't fully up yet. Savannah, in the early morning, smells like river water and dew, and the faint ghost of last night's jasmine. I stepped onto the porch, and the October air touched my face, cool and clean, carrying no hint of the destruction waiting inside those envelopes locked in Gerald's cabinet. I drove to Bull Street, parked outside the post office 20 minutes before it opened. And I waited for Hattie Monroe, the woman who'd lost someone she loved to this same pattern, to tell me what came next. Hattie Monroe arrived at 6:15. I know because I'd been sitting in my truck since 5:45, engine off, watching Bull Street wake up. A jogger with a golden retriever. Mrs. Beaumont setting up her praline cart, humming a hymn I recognized from Sundays at First African Baptist. Ordinary people, on an ordinary morning, none of them carrying a folder full of evidence that their daughter-in-law was living a double life. Hattie parked her old blue sedan in the employee spot and walked toward the side entrance. She didn't look surprised when she saw me leaning against the brick wall. She looked like she'd been expecting me. "How bad?" she asked, unlocking the door. "Worse than 2 names. Come in. I'll make coffee." The back room looked different in early morning light. No fluorescent buzz yet. just gray dawn through a small window, and the gurgle of Hattie's coffee maker on a shelf beside a framed photograph I hadn't noticed yesterday. A young man. Bright smile. Kind eyes. Something about those eyes made my chest tighten, though I couldn't say why. I spread my photocopies across the metal table. Chronological. Connected. Each document building on the one before. The Miami condo. The passport. The credit cards in 3 states. The bank statements with their tangled transfers. And the letter. The dissolution of marriage my son didn't know existed. Filed by a woman using a name he'd never heard. Hattie studied each document without rushing. She held the dissolution letter longest, reading it the way you read a diagnosis. When she set it down, her fingers pressed flat against the paper, holding something down that wanted to rise. "It's the same," she said quietly. "Different names, different city. But it's the same." She moved to a locker in the corner. Combination lock worn smooth from years of turning. She pulled out a notebook. Not a postal service log. A hardcover composition book, the black and white marbled kind I used to buy by the dozen for my classroom. Except this one was thick with years. Binding cracked and softened. Pages swollen from being written on both sides. "I started keeping this 4 years ago," she said. "The day I transferred to this post office. Every package that comes through with something wrong about it, I log it. Name, date, sender, return address, weight." I opened the notebook. The entries were meticulous. Color-coded tabs separating months. Margin notes cross-referencing names and dates. This wasn't a suspicious clerk with too much time. This was a woman on a mission, cataloging evidence one package at a time for 4 years. "This is hundreds of entries," I said. "Most are nothing. Innocent mistakes. But some of them," she pointed to entries marked with small red dots, "some are the pattern. 2 names at one address. Legal documents. Financial papers from law firms in other states." I counted. 14 red dots over 4 years. "Did you report them?" "Twice. Early on." Her jaw tightened. "Postal Service doesn't investigate contents. Not our jurisdiction. The police told me I was a postal clerk, not a detective. Said to call the fraud department. I called. They said they'd look into it." She paused. "They never did." She closed the notebook. Placed both palms on its cover. 4 years, Carol. Watching. Logging. Waiting. Praying. I'd catch the right one at the right time. Why? The question came out softer than I intended. "Hattie, why would you spend 4 years doing this?" She looked at the photograph on the shelf. The young man with the bright smile. Looked at him the way I look at Gerald's picture on my nightstand, with a love so deep it lives in the bones. "Because I've seen this before." This time her voice carried something it hadn't yesterday. Not just sorrow. Grief. The kind that never fully heals. That calcifies into something you carry in your posture and your breathing. And the way you hold a coffee cup like you're afraid of letting go. The 2 names. The legal documents. The money moving like water. I watched it happen step by step, and I told myself it wasn't my business. Told myself I was imagining things. What happened? Her hand moved toward the photograph. Didn't touch it. Just hovered. He lost everything. The house. The savings. His credit. His name. They destroyed his name, Carol. Made it so nobody would believe him. Every door closed before he could knock. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. And then he lost himself. My boy. 2 words that landed like stones in still water. I looked at the photograph again. The young man. The kind eyes that had made my chest tighten because they reminded me of someone. They reminded me of Marcus. "Hattie." My voice was barely there. "That's your son." She didn't confirm it. Didn't need to. The way she looked at that photograph said everything language couldn't carry. A mother, looking at the child she couldn't save. The room went quiet. coffee maker settling. First sounds of Bull Street outside. Two mothers across a metal table covered in evidence of crimes that rhymed like verses from the same terrible poem. "Your boy's still here, Carol." Hattie's voice was steady now. Steady the way foundations are steady. Not because they don't feel the weight, but because holding it is what they were built to do. "He's still here, and I intend to keep him that way." "I'll go through the finances," I said. "Credit reports, bank records, insurance. If there's a money trail, I'll find it, and I'll watch the mail. Every package in, every package out. If that girl sends or receives anything through this post office, I'll know about it before the ink dries." At the door, I turned. "Hattie, you said someone died. You said my boy. What was his name?" "Not yet." Her voice softened. "I'll tell you everything, Carol. But not yet. Right now, we focus on Marcus. We focus on keeping him safe. The rest comes later." I walked into the October morning. Sun warm on my face, burning through the mist that clings to Savannah's streets like memory. Bull Street alive with commuters and students. None of them knew that two women had just declared war in the back room of a post office, armed with nothing but a composition notebook, a folder full of lies, and the one thing that makes mothers more dangerous than anyone expects. We had something to protect. And God help anyone who stood in our way. I spent my career grading papers and organizing lesson plans. I never imagined those same skills would help me unravel a financial crime worth almost $2 million. But that's exactly what happened the Wednesday and Thursday after Hattie and I declared our quiet little war. My kitchen table disappeared beneath a system that would have made my third graders proud. Color-coded folders. Timeline strips taped end to end across the surface. Post-it notes in 4 colors: yellow for confirmed facts, pink for suspicions, green for questions, blue for action items. A yellow legal pad, Gerald's brand, open to a fresh page. 3 sharpened pencils lined up beside it because a teacher always keeps backups. Gerald had made me secondary authorizer on Marcus's primary accounts years ago, back when Marcus was 22 and just starting his career. "In case something happens to me," Gerald said. "Someone needs to watch over the boy's finances until he's steady." I'd never used that access. Never needed to. Marcus was responsible with money, careful the way Gerald taught him, but the authorization was still active. It had never been revoked because Marcus trusted his mother the way he trusted everyone, completely and without question. That trust was about to save his life. I logged into Marcus's checking account first. The recent transactions looked normal. Groceries, gas, a dinner at Elizabeth, on 37th last Friday, probably with Jenna. Mortgage payment on the house, the small craftsman bungalow Marcus bought 3 years ago in Ardsley Park. Everything ordinary. Then I clicked on account settings. And the ordinary ended. 4 credit cards had been opened under Marcus's social security number in the past 14 months. 4 cards he'd never applied for. At banks he'd never visited. In cities he'd never lived. First National of Jacksonville, Florida. Palmetto Savings of Charleston, South Carolina. Gulf Coast Credit Union of Birmingham, Alabama. Peachtree Financial of Atlanta, Georgia. Each card maxed out. Combined balance: $180,000. $180,000 of debt my son didn't know he carried. I wrote each number on the legal pad. Drew lines connecting them. Jacksonville, where the divorce lawyer operated. Charleston and Birmingham, where the other credit cards from Jenna's packages had been issued. Atlanta, where Jenna claimed she'd grown up but hadn't. 4 cities, 4 cards. A constellation of fraud mapped across the southeast, each point chosen far enough from Savannah to avoid triggering local alerts, close enough to manage with periodic visits disguised as business trips. This was not impulsive. This was architecture. Someone had designed this system the way Gerald used to design estate plans, with layers and redundancies and escape routes built into the foundation, every card application perfectly timed, every credit line maxed at a rate that mimicked normal spending, so the fraud departments wouldn't flag it. Professional, methodical, patient. My stomach turned, but I kept clicking. Insurance. Marcus had his standard employer coverage through the engineering firm. Health, dental, basic life policy, worth twice his salary. Nothing unusual. But beneath the employer plan, buried in a subsection I almost scrolled past, was a supplemental life insurance policy. Purchased 18 months ago. Coverage amount, $1.8 million. Beneficiary, Carol Weston. Purchaser, not Marcus. The policy had been bought by Coastal Living LLC, the same shell company that owned the Miami condo. The same company connected to every offshore transfer I'd found in those bank statements. $1.8 million. If Marcus died, Jenna collected $1.8 million on top of whatever she'd already stolen. I sat back in my chair. The kitchen felt smaller. The overhead light Gerald installed felt harsher. I thought about Hattie's words. He lost everything. Then, he lost himself. I thought about the insurance policy and the number attached to my son's life, like a price tag on a piece of merchandise. Then I thought about Jenna. Not the Jenna from the documents. The other one. The one who brought peach cobbler every Sunday. The one who sat beside my hospital bed after my hip surgery 2 years ago, holding my hand through the night, reading to me from a novel she'd brought because she remembered I liked mysteries. The one who cried at Gerald's grave on the anniversary of his death, leaving magnolia blossoms she'd picked from our tree because she said, "He deserves flowers from his own garden, Mom Carol." How do you reconcile those two women? The one who held your hand through pain and the one who calculated your son's life at $1.8 million. I've taught hundreds of children over 35 years. I've seen students who could smile at you while lying through their teeth. I've seen parents perform love like a Broadway show while destroying their families behind closed doors. I know that kindness can be manufactured. I know that warmth can be strategic, but Jenna's tears at Gerald's grave, her hand in mine through that long hospital night, the peach cobbler she made from scratch every single Sunday for 20 months, without missing once. Was any of it real? I closed my eyes, breathed, let the question sit there like a stone I couldn't move. Then I opened my eyes and went back to the numbers, because numbers don't lie. People lie. Numbers just tell you where the bodies are buried. I spent the rest of Thursday mapping every transaction I could access. The offshore transfers formed a pattern, a steady monthly flow from Marcus's accounts into Coastal Living LLC, then out to routing numbers I couldn't trace. Small amounts. 2,000 here. 1,500 there. Nothing large enough to trigger alerts individually, but collectively. Over 18 months, the total made me dizzy. Jenna had siphoned nearly $90,000 from my son's accounts in amounts designed to be invisible. Gerald used to say the smartest criminals don't steal your wallet. They steal $1 a day and count on you never noticing. Jenna was smarter than that. She stole in amounts that matched Marcus's normal spending patterns, buried between grocery runs and utility payments, invisible unless you knew exactly what to look for. By Thursday evening, my legal pad was full. Both sides. Numbers, dates, account names, routing codes. A financial autopsy of my son's marriage performed on the same kitchen table where Jenna had eaten Sunday dinner 3 days ago. My phone rang at 9:17. Hattie. Carol. Her voice was tight, controlled. The voice of a woman holding back something enormous. I intercepted another package this afternoon. Came in on the late truck. From who? A real estate agency. Here in Savannah. My hand tightened on the phone. What kind of real estate? Property transfer documents, Carol. For a house on Habersham Street. She paused. She's selling your family's house. Gerald's house. And from what I can see, she's already found a buyer. The kitchen went silent. Not quiet. Silent. The kind of silence that fills a room when something fundamental breaks. something that was supposed to be permanent and protected and safe. Gerald's house. The house he built with his own hands. The magnolia tree. The porch where Marcus took his first steps. The fireplace Gerald laid brick by brick, being sold by a woman who had no right to touch it, using a signature that wasn't my son's. "I'll be there in the morning," I said. "I know you will." I hung up, stared at the kitchen wall. The wedding photograph stared back. And for the first time since this started, the grief I felt wasn't for what Jenna had done to my son's money. It was for what she was about to do to his father's memory. Gerald built that house the year before Marcus was born. I've seen the photographs, Gerald at 28, shirtless in the Georgia heat, hauling lumber up the porch steps of a Victorian wreck on Habersham Street that everyone else said was beyond saving. The realtor had laughed when Gerald made the offer. "Son, that house needs more than love. It needs a miracle." Gerald told him love was the miracle. He just needed time and a good foundation. It took him 14 months. Every evening after work, every weekend, every holiday. He replaced the floorboards himself, sanded and stained them until they gleamed like honey. He rebuilt the porch railing. With cypress, he'd driven to Louisiana to select personally because cypress doesn't rot, and Gerald believed some things should be built to outlast the people who build them. The day I told him I was pregnant, he drove to a nursery in Pooler and came home with a magnolia sapling no taller than his forearm. Planted it in the front yard before dinner. "This tree will be here when our grandchildren play under it," he said. "Some things you plant for people you haven't met yet. That tree is 40 feet tall now. Its branches shade the entire front yard. Every spring, the blossoms fill Habersham Street with a scent so sweet it stops you mid-step. And every spring, I stand on the porch and talk to Gerald about the year he missed." Friday morning, I drove to Habersham Street with the package Hattie had intercepted the evening before. I parked across the street and sat for a moment, looking at the house the way you look at something you're afraid of losing. The porch Gerald rebuilt. The windows he reglazed one by one. The magnolia tree standing guard in the front yard. Marcus and Jenna lived there now. I'd given Marcus the house after Gerald died because Gerald would have wanted it that way. "Keep it in the family, Carol. That house is us." I opened the package in my car. My fingers were steady. Everything else inside me was not. Property transfer documents. The house on Habersham Street, appraised at $1.2 million, listed for sale through a real estate agency I didn't recognize. Closing date scheduled for November 15th. Less than a month away. The seller's signature on the listing agreement was Marcus Weston's. Except it wasn't. I knew my son's handwriting the way I knew my own heartbeat. I'd watched it evolve from the wobbly letters of a kindergartner to the careful print of a college student to the confident signature of a grown man. I'd graded thousands of papers in my career, and no skill from those 35 years served me better than this one. The signature on that document was close. Professionally close. The loops, the spacing, the pressure. Someone had studied Marcus's writing with the patience of a forger who understood that the difference between freedom and prison lives in the angle of a pen stroke. But the crossbar on the T was wrong. Marcus crosses his T's with a slight upward flick at the end. A habit he picked up from Gerald. This signature crossed straight. Flat. Dead. That single flat line told me everything. I sat in my car holding the document, staring at Gerald's house through the windshield, and something broke inside me. Not dramatically. Not the way it happens in movies. It was quiet. The sound of a foundation cracking under weight it was never designed to carry. This house where Gerald had hauled lumber in the heat, where he'd rocked Marcus to sleep on the porch during thunderstorms because the sound of rain on a tin roof was better than any lullaby, where he'd kissed me goodbye every morning for 37 years, standing in the doorway with his coffee, watching me drive away, never once forgetting to wave. Jenna was selling it. Selling our memories. Selling Gerald's hands in every board and nail. Selling the magnolia tree he planted for grandchildren he never got to meet. converting it all into numbers in an offshore account that would follow her to Miami or Jacksonville or wherever the next lie was waiting. I cried. For the first time since this started, 3 days of discoveries and sleepless nights and growing horror, I let the tears come. Not long, not dramatically, just a few minutes of honest grief for the violation of something sacred. Gerald's house wasn't property. It was a love letter written in wood and glass and 40 years of care. Then I stopped. Because grief is a luxury when your son's life is being dismantled, and I didn't have time for luxury. Grief turns to steel in a mother who's been robbed, and steel doesn't cry. Steel cuts. I picked up my phone and called Richard Calloway. Richard had been Gerald's closest friend for 40 years. They'd met at the University of Georgia Law School, roomed together, started their careers in the same year. When Gerald shifted to real estate law, Richard followed. They'd built their practices side by side, referring clients, sharing office space, arguing about football, and growing old together the way men do when friendship becomes indistinguishable from family. Richard had been a pallbearer at Gerald's funeral. He'd sat in my kitchen afterward, held my hand, and told me if I ever needed anything at all, to call. I was calling. Richard, I need you to look at something. It's about Gerald's house. 20 minutes later, I was in his office on Bay Street. The room smelled like leather and old books, and the particular aftershave Richard had worn since 1982. Gerald used to tease him about it. Said it smelled like a library that was trying too hard. I set the property transfer documents on his desk beside the financial records I'd compiled over the past 2 days. Richard put on his reading glasses and went silent. He studied the documents for 15 minutes, turned pages slowly, compared signatures, held the listing agreement up to the light, the way he'd held hundreds of suspicious documents over a 40-year career. When he set it down, his face had changed. The genial old friend was gone. In his place was the attorney. Sharp, focused, angry. The signature is forged, he said. Expertly, but forged. I know, Carol. This listing agreement was processed through a legitimate agency. Someone filed this with the county. Someone started the title search. This isn't one person with a pen. This requires cooperation, access to systems, knowledge of how property transfers work at an institutional level. What are you saying? Richard removed his glasses, rubbed the bridge of his nose. When he looked at me, his expression carried something I'd only seen once before. The day he'd told me Gerald's cancer had spread. I'm saying this isn't amateur work. Whoever forged Marcus's signature has done this before, professionally. The document quality, the filing procedures, the timing. Carol, you're not dealing with a con artist. He paused. You're dealing with an operation. An operation. The word settled over the room like a verdict. Not a single woman running a scam. An operation. Infrastructure. Systems. Multiple people working coordinated roles. I need a forensic handwriting expert, I said. Someone who can put this in writing. Official. Court. Admissible. Richard was already reaching for his phone. Lorraine Palmer. Best in the Southeast. She owes me a favor. I gathered my documents. At the door, I turned back. Richard, Gerald made me promise to keep that house in the family. I intend to keep that promise. Richard looked at me over his glasses. Gerald would be proud of you right now, Carol. And also terrified. Good. That means I'm doing something right. I drove home through Savannah's Friday afternoon traffic, past the squares with their monuments and live oaks, past the tourists photographing the Spanish moss, past the world that kept turning while mine was being taken apart piece by piece. But something had shifted. The grief that had broken me in that car on Habersham Street had done its work and left behind something harder. Something with edges. Gerald built that house to last. And I was going to make sure it did. Saturday morning, Jenna called while I was sitting at my kitchen table staring at a legal pad full of numbers that could put her in prison. Her name lit up my phone screen, and for 3 rings I just looked at it. Jenna with the little heart emoji Marcus had added to her contact. Jenna who made peach cobbler from scratch. Jenna who was secretly divorcing my son, stealing his identity across 4 states, and selling his dead father's house out from under him. I answered on the 4th ring. Made my voice warm. Made it motherly. Made it everything she expected to hear. Good morning, sweetheart. Mom Carol. That voice. Bright. Musical. The voice of a woman who'd never told a lie in her life. I just got back from my trip last night. I missed you so much. Come over for brunch? I'm making your favorite peach cobbler, and Marcus is firing up the grill. 35 years of teaching teenagers taught me one essential skill. Never let them see you react. Not when they lie to your face. Not when they cheat on a test and look you in the eye and swear they didn't. Not when you know the truth and they know you know, and the whole game depends on who blinks first. I never blinked. Not once in 35 years. And I wasn't about to start now. I would love that, honey. I'll bring the sweet tea. The drive to Marcus and Jenna's house in Ardsley Park took 12 minutes. 12 minutes to rehearse. 12 minutes to build the mask I'd need to wear for the next several hours. I practiced in the rearview mirror at stoplights. The smile. The warmth. The unsuspecting mother-in-law who still believed her daughter-in-law hung the moon. Their craftsman bungalow looked postcard perfect when I pulled up. Fresh flowers in the window boxes. The porch swing Jenna had found at an antique market in Tybee Island. Wind chimes singing in the October breeze. Beautiful. Curated. A stage set designed to make you believe in the performance. Jenna met me at the door with a hug that lasted 5 full seconds. I counted. She smelled like vanilla and peach, and something floral I couldn't name. Mom Carol, you look wonderful. Is that a new blouse? It wasn't. I'd worn it 3 times before. But Jenna noticed things. Or pretended to. That was her gift. The ability to make you feel seen. Studied. Important. I'd mistaken it for love. Now I recognized it for what it was. Surveillance. Just something I found in the back of the closet. I said, squeezing her hands. Now where's that cobbler? I've been thinking about it all morning. Marcus was in the backyard tending the grill. He waved through the kitchen window, tongs in one hand, that easy grin spreading across his face. Gerald's grin. The one that assumes the best about everyone and everything. The one that makes him a wonderful person and a terrible judge of character. Hey, Mom. Glad you could make it. Wouldn't miss it, baby. Brunch was an exercise in torture. Jenna had set the dining table with cloth napkins and fresh magnolias from the farmer's market. She served eggs, Benedict, fruit salad, and that peach cobbler still warm from the oven. She told stories about her work trip, fabricated adventures in cities she'd probably never visited, delivered with the practiced ease of someone who'd been rehearsing fiction her entire adult life. I laughed at the right moments, asked follow-up questions, complimented the food, touched her arm when she said something funny, played the role of adoring mother-in-law with a precision that frightened me. Because I realized, sitting there watching Jenna perform, that I was performing too. We were 2 actresses at the same table, both smiling, both lying, both hiding knives behind our backs. The difference was, I knew which of us was holding the sharper blade. After brunch, I made my move. Jenna, honey, you've been working so hard. You deserve a treat. I pulled an envelope from my purse. A gift card for the spa on Broughton Street. $75. I'd bought it yesterday specifically for this purpose. Go relax. Get a massage. I'll clean up here. Jenna's eyes widened. Mom Carol, you didn't have to do that. I wanted to. You take such good care of Marcus. Let someone take care of you for a change. She hugged me again. Longer this time. You're the mother I never had, she whispered against my shoulder. And I held her and smiled and said, And you're the daughter I prayed for. The words tasted like ash on my tongue, but I delivered them perfectly. 35 years of telling students they did a great job when they needed encouragement more than honesty. Performance is a muscle. Mine was strong. Marcus decided to hit the gym while Jenna was at the spa. He kissed my cheek at the door. Thanks for coming, Mom. Means a lot. Then, they were both gone. Jenna's car pulling left toward Broughton Street. Marcus's truck turning right toward the gym on Victory Drive. I stood in the kitchen of my son's house, alone with the dishes, the leftover cobbler, and Jenna's laptop sitting open on the counter, where she'd left it charging. I hadn't planned to search the laptop today. I'd planned to keep this visit purely observational, gather impressions, maintain cover. But there it was. Open. Screen. Dark, but not locked. The charging light blinking green like a heartbeat. I touched the trackpad. The screen woke up. Password required. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. This was a line. Everything before this, the packages, the financial research, the documents from Hattie, those were things that had come to me. I'd received them. But this was different. This was breaking into someone's private device. This was choosing to cross from defense to offense. I thought about $1.8 million in life insurance with my son's name on it. I thought about the dissolution letter and the offshore accounts and Gerald's house, listed for sale with a forged signature. I thought about Hattie's son, the boy with the kind eyes, and the word she'd used. Gone. Password hint. Favorite flower. I stared at those two words. Favorite flower. And I knew the answer before my fingers touched the keys, because I was the one who'd taught her. 2 summers ago, standing in my garden on Habersham Street, showing Jenna how to prune the magnolia tree Gerald had planted. She'd buried her nose in a blossom and sighed. This is the most beautiful thing I've ever smelled, Mom Carol. Magnolias are my favorite now. Forever. I'd believed her. I'd believed every word. Because who lies about loving a flower? I typed Magnolia and pressed enter. The laptop unlocked. Jenna's desktop appeared, organized into neat folders. Documents, photos, travel, and one folder, tucked in the bottom corner, labeled with a word that made my blood freeze. Insurance. I checked the time on the microwave. Jenna's spa appointment was 90 minutes. I'd been alone for 12. That gave me just over an hour to find out what my daughter-in-law was insuring herself against. I opened the folder. The folder contained 47 files, organized into subfolders with labels that read like chapters in a manual for destroying someone's life. Travel. Legal. Documentation. Witness statements. Each one a blade. Sharpened and waiting. I opened travel first. A confirmation email from Delta Airlines. One-way ticket. Savannah to Miami, Miami to San Jose, Costa Rica. Departure date. October 25th. One passenger. Jenna Richardson. One way. Not round trip. 10 days from now. The woman who called me Mom Carol planned to board a plane and never come back. The legal subfolder held 8 months of emails between Jenna and Castellano and Price, the Jacksonville law firm from the dissolution letter. Professional, transactional. The language of 2 parties executing a business plan. One email dated 3 weeks ago stopped me cold. As discussed, we strongly recommend completing the domestic violence filing prior to your departure date to ensure maximum asset protection. Once the protective order is in place, contested claims become significantly more difficult for the opposing party to pursue. Please confirm your preferred filing date. Domestic violence filing. Protective order. The opposing party was my son. Jenna's reply was one line. Filing date confirmed. Friday, October 24th. 1 day before departure, next Friday. She would walk into a courthouse, accuse Marcus of beating her, obtain a restraining order that would prevent him from contesting any financial claims, and board a plane the next morning. By the time Marcus understood what happened, she'd be in another country with his money, his credit, his father's house, and a legal record painting him as a monster. My hands trembled, but I kept clicking. The documentation subfolder was where the knife twisted deepest. Photographs. Dozens. Jenna's face, arms, and neck, showing bruises in various stages of healing. Blues and purples and sickly yellows mapped across her skin. Except the suffering was manufactured. Buried among the photographs were 3 browser bookmarks I'll never forget. Stage bruising for film. Professional techniques. Realistic injury makeup. Step-by-step guide. How to photograph bruises for maximum legal impact. Painted on. Every mark. Every discoloration. Every piece of evidence that would convince a judge my son was violent had been applied with brushes and pigment and the cold patience of a woman who understood that in a courtroom, a photograph doesn't speak 1,000 words. It speaks a verdict. Below the photographs, a document labeled Journal, a diary. 6 months of dated entries. Each one a detailed account of abuse that never happened. March 12th. Marcus came home angry tonight. He grabbed my arm so hard I thought it would break. I'm scared, but I don't know who to tell. April 29th. He hit me today. Closed fist. I covered the bruise with foundation and went to work. Nobody noticed. July 15th. I told Brenda what's been happening. She begged me to leave. I'm not ready. Entry after entry. 6 months of fabricated horror written with enough specific detail to survive cross-examination, enough emotional texture to break a judge's heart, enough consistency to bury my son under lies so heavy he'd never climb out. The final subfolder, witness statements, completed the trap. Text message screenshots between Jenna and Brenda Hollins. Except these weren't real conversations. They were scripted, rehearsed. I don't know what to do anymore. He hurt me again last night. Jenna, you have to get out. This isn't love. He's going to kill you. I'm scared if I leave, he'll find me. He controls everything. I'm here for you. Whatever you need. I'll testify. Brenda wasn't a concerned friend. She was a supporting actress. The texts would be submitted alongside the photographs and diary. A judge would see a battered woman, a loyal friend, a documented history of violence, and a husband whose denial would sound exactly like what every abuser says. He didn't do it. She's lying. Nobody believes that. Jenna knew it. The accusation alone would consume Marcus in legal proceedings so completely he'd never have bandwidth to chase the stolen money. That was the design. Not justice. Paralysis. I checked the time. 53 minutes since Jenna left. I pulled out my phone and photographed everything. Every email, every fake bruise, every diary entry, every scripted text. Systematic, complete, the way I documented student records for 35 years. When I finished, I closed every folder in the exact order I'd opened them. Cleared access timestamps from browser history, put the laptop to sleep, and positioned it on the counter precisely where Jenna had left it. Charging light, blinking green. Then I washed the brunch dishes, dried them, put them away, wiped the counters, made the kitchen look exactly the way a devoted mother-in-law would leave it. The front door opened at 3:47. 13 minutes early. My heart slammed against my ribs, but my hands stayed on the dish towel. Steady. Jenna swept in, smelling like eucalyptus and lavender. Mom, Carol. You're still here. She wrapped her arms around me. That spa was heavenly. Stay for dinner? I hugged her back. Held on for exactly the right number of seconds. Not too long, not too short. The precise duration of a mother's love. Calibrated. Controlled. Of course, honey. I'd love that. Marcus came home 20 minutes later. Found us laughing in the kitchen over a recipe on Jenna's phone. The same phone containing scripted messages designed to frame him. He kissed Jenna's forehead, squeezed my shoulder. My two favorite women, he said. I stayed for dinner, smiled through every bite, told a story about a student who brought a frog to class in 1997, made Jenna laugh, made Marcus laugh, played the role until the evening ended with hugs at the door. In my car, sitting in the dark, I allowed myself one sentence, whispered it to the windshield, to Gerald, to God. I hugged the woman who is planning to destroy my son's life, and I made sure she felt nothing but love. Tomorrow I'd tell Hattie everything. Tomorrow we'd plan. But tonight, I sat with what I'd seen. The fake bruises. The diary that never happened. The scripted friend. Jenna wasn't just stealing from Marcus. To rewrite his story so completely that the good man with Gerald's grin would cease to exist. Replaced by a monster she'd invented. A fiction designed to be his cage while she walked free. She had 10 days. I intended to make sure she didn't get a single one. Hattie Monroe lived 11 minutes south of the post office, in a narrow cottage on the Thunderbolt waterway where shrimp boats rocked against barnacled pilings and the air always smelled of salt and diesel. I had never been inside. In 30 years of mailing Christmas cards and birthday packages from her counter, I knew Hattie's handwriting better than my own, yet I had never once seen where she slept at night. That changed on Sunday afternoon, 9 days before a Delta jet was scheduled to carry Jenna Richardson out of the country and my son's life into ruin. She was waiting on the porch when I pulled up, 2 glasses of sweet tea already sweating on the railing. No small talk. She held the screen door open, led me through a hallway lined with framed school portraits, and stopped at a back room that might once have been a nursery. Now, it was an archive. A corkboard covered one wall, pinned with photocopied envelopes, postal tracking slips, and handwritten timelines in red and blue ink. A second wall held a county map of Savannah, with colored pushpins marking addresses. On a small desk beneath the window sat a Nike shoebox. Its lid held shut with 2 rubber bands. "Before I open this," Hattie said, settling into a wooden chair, "you need to hear about my boy." I sat on the edge of a daybed that still had a quilt folded military tight. I did not interrupt her once. His name was Darnell Monroe. He was born in this house, shark tooth gap in his first-grade photo, captain of the Lincoln High debate team, full scholarship to Morehouse, accounting degree with honors. By 26, he had his CPA license and a corner office in an Atlanta firm whose name Hattie still would not say aloud. By 28, he had married a woman who arrived in his life like weather, fast, warm, impossible to predict. She was bright, Hattie whispered. Laughed with her whole body. Brought me flowers every visit. I loved her. She paused. That's the part that still cuts. Within 6 months, the new wife persuaded Darnell to open joint accounts. Within 9, she had added a second mortgage to his Buckhead townhouse. Within 12, she had opened credit lines in 3 states, Jacksonville, Charleston, Birmingham, the same cities, the same pattern I had seen in Jenna's documents. Total debt exceeded $140,000, all in Darnell's name, all signed with a version of his handwriting that was close enough to fool a bank teller, but not close enough to fool his mother. I saw the first statement by accident, Hattie said. A Charleston visa bill forwarded here because Darnell still used my address for overflow mail. I called him. He said it was a misunderstanding, said she was sorting it out. Mothers want to believe their children are safe, Carol. So I believed him. The wife moved faster than belief. She filed a domestic violence complaint 3 days before Darnell discovered the debt. A restraining order followed. The court granted her temporary possession of the townhouse and froze his accounts. Darnell, barred from his own home and stripped of liquid assets, moved into a studio apartment near the Chattahoochee River. He called Hattie every evening at 9. The calls grew shorter. His voice grew flatter. On a Tuesday, Hattie said. He didn't call. Darnell Monroe drove his Civic off the Chattahoochee Bridge at 11:47 p.m. He was 31 years old, the same age as Marcus. Hattie did not cry while she told me this. Her eyes were dry and fixed on the corkboard. I understood. She had cried every tear available to a human body years ago. What remained was something harder. Not anger exactly, but a kind of geological pressure. The slow compression of grief into purpose. After the funeral, she spent 8 months tracking the wife, who had liquidated Darnell's assets, closed the credit lines, and relocated. The trail ended in Savannah, where the woman resurfaced under a new surname and a new target. Hattie could not prove a criminal case alone, but she could watch. And from behind her postal counter, she watched for 4 years, 312 shifts, she said, each one logged in the composition notebook I had already seen. She recorded every suspicious envelope, every legal-size mailer from law offices she did not recognize, every package bearing a name that did not match the address on file. 14 red dots, she said, tapping the notebook. 14 times the pattern repeated 2 names. Same address. Legal documents, moving money. I stared at the corkboard and saw the geometry of fraud laid out in pushpins and string. The same architecture Jenna was building around Marcus. Joint accounts, forged signatures, phantom credit lines, a domestic violence filing timed to the hour, and a one-way ticket out. Hattie removed the rubber bands from the Nike shoebox. Inside were 4 years of evidence arranged in dated envelopes. Photocopied mail logs, notarized postal records, screenshots of routing numbers, a thumb drive, and a single photograph. She handed me the photograph first. Darnell Monroe smiled up at me from a Morehouse graduation stage, tassels swinging, eyes bright with a future he would never reach. He looked, God help me, like Marcus, the same broad forehead, the same easy grin that made you believe everything would be fine. I kept quiet once, Hattie said. He died. I won't keep quiet again. Neither will you. I placed the photograph back in the box carefully, the way you handle something that belongs in a courtroom exhibit bag. Then I pulled my chair closer to the desk, and together we began laying the envelopes out in chronological order. 4 years of silence finally given a voice. Outside, a shrimp boat horn sounded on the Thunderbolt waterway. The tide was going out. And so, I decided, was Jenna. We worked until the mosquitoes found us through the window screen, and the Thunderbolt waterway turned black beneath a quarter moon. By then, every envelope from the Nike shoebox was open. Every document sorted into one of 5 stacks on Hattie's desk. Financial fraud, forged signatures, identity records, postal logs, and a 5th pile. I simply labeled Darnell because the papers in it, a death certificate, an autopsy summary, a single-paragraph police report that called a 31-year-old man suicide, no indication of foul play, deserved their own silence. I drove home at 11 with the thumb drive in my purse and photographs of every document on my phone. I did not sleep. I sat at Gerald's kitchen table, the same pine surface where he had once spread blueprints for the Habersham house. And I built a war room. By Monday morning, the table was gone. Not physically, it was still there. Scarred and solid, but its identity had changed. It was no longer a place for coffee and crossword puzzles. It was a command center. I covered it with a sheet of butcher paper borrowed from the art closet at my old school, and began drawing a timeline with a fat red marker Gerald would have called teacher grade. The timeline started 18 months ago, when Jenna first entered our lives through a dating app Marcus mentioned over Sunday dinner. She likes jazz and rescue dogs, Mom. You'll love her. I wrote that date on the far left of the butcher paper and circled it. Then I moved right, week by week, filling in every event I could verify. Month 3. Jenna moved into Marcus's bungalow in Ardsley Park. Month 5. She suggested merging bank accounts to simplify taxes. Month 7. She opened the first credit card in Jacksonville, the one I had found in the package, charging furniture for a condo that did not belong to my son. Month 9. Charleston. Month 11. Birmingham. Month 14. The Miami condo purchased through Coastal Living, LLC for cash that had been siphoned, $90,000 in small automated transfers from Marcus's savings. I drew a vertical red line at month 16. That was when the $1.8 million life insurance policy appeared. purchased not by Marcus, but by Coastal Living LLC, listing Jenna Weston as sole beneficiary. My son was worth more dead than alive, and he did not know it. Below the timeline, I taped photocopies of every key document. The forged signature on the Habersham Street property transfer, the passport in the name Jenna Richardson, the bruise photographs manufactured with drugstore makeup, the 6-month abuse diary written in a hand too steady for a woman supposedly living in fear, and the scripted text messages between Jenna and Brenda Hollins, the so-called witness, whose lines read like a screenplay draft. Above the timeline, I pinned Hattie's postal logs. 14 red dot entries now had context. Each dot corresponded to a legal envelope or financial package that carried Jenna Richardson's name to my son's address. Hattie had noted the return addresses: a Jacksonville law firm, a Charleston bank branch, a Birmingham credit union, a Miami title company. 4 cities, 4 threads, 1 web. I stood back and looked at the butcher paper the way I used to look at a classroom bulletin board before open and house night, checking for gaps, for misspelled words, for anything a visitor might question. 3 gaps stared back at me. First, I had no direct proof linking the woman who destroyed Darnell Monroe to the woman living in my son's house. Hattie believed they were the same person. The pattern screamed it. But belief and pattern were not evidence a district attorney would accept. I needed a name bridge, a document, a photograph, a fingerprint that connected Darnell's wife to Jenna Richardson, to Jenna Weston. Second, I had no witness other than Hattie. Richard Calloway could authenticate the forged signature, and Lorraine Palmer's handwriting analysis would strengthen the case, but neither of them had seen Jenna operate in real time. Brenda Hollins, the scripted friend, might flip or might not. I circled Brenda's name and drew a question mark beside it. Third, I had 9 days. The domestic violence filing was scheduled for Friday, October 24. The Delta flight left Saturday, October 25. If Jenna filed that restraining order, Marcus would be frozen out of his own accounts, barred from his own home, and branded an abuser in a public record, the same sequence that had killed Darnell Monroe. After the filing, the legal machinery would move faster than a 62-year-old retired teacher could. I poured a 4th cup of coffee. It was 6:30 in the morning. Light crept across the butcher paper like a slow reveal, illuminating each red circle, each taped document, each question mark. The war room looked, I realized, like a lesson plan. The most important lesson plan I had ever written, with my son's life as the subject and 9 days as the semester. I picked up my phone and called Hattie. She answered on the first ring, which meant she had not slept either. I need the name Bridge, I said. Whatever connected your daughter-in-law to Jenna Richardson, do you have it? A pause. Then Hattie's voice, low and precise. I have half of it. A forwarding address form she filed 3 years ago. The outgoing name was different from the incoming one, same handwriting. And the other half? The other half is in the county clerk's office, Carol. Marriage license, name change petition, notarized, filed right here in Chatham County. I looked at the war room, at the gap where the name bridge should go, and felt the same click I used to feel when a struggling student finally sounded out a word. Then that's where we're going, I said. Today. The Chatham County Courthouse sat on Montgomery Street like a limestone promise that the law still meant something. I had been inside exactly twice in my life, once to file Gerald's death certificate and once to serve jury duty on a shoplifting case that lasted 2 hours. Both times I walked out feeling the building had done its job. This time I was not so sure the building would cooperate. Hattie drove. She said her truck knew every parking meter downtown and which ones the meter maids checked last. I did not argue. We arrived at 8:51 a.m., 9 minutes before the clerk's office opened, and sat in the cab watching courthouse employees carry travel mugs through the side entrance. When we get in there, Hattie said, let me do the first round of talking. The woman at the records counter is Pauline Jeffers. She's been there 22 years. She won't bend rules, but she respects process. If we request the documents properly, she'll pull them. And if the documents have been sealed or removed, Hattie looked at me. Then we'll know someone got there first. And that tells us something too. The clerk's office smelled like toner and old carpet. A fluorescent tube above the counter flickered at a rhythm that would have given my third graders a headache. Pauline Jeffers sat behind a plexiglass divider with a nameplate that read, "Records Clerk. Public Access." She was heavy-set, mid-50s, reading glasses on a beaded chain, and she did not smile when we approached. Hattie placed a handwritten request slip on the counter. She had filled it out at home. I recognized her postal neat handwriting. The slip asked for 2 public records: a marriage license filed in Chatham County within the past 4 years under the surname Richardson, and a legal name change petition filed within the same window. Pauline read the slip, looked at Hattie over her glasses, and said, "Relation to the party? Interested citizen," Hattie said. "These are public records." Pauline held the look for 3 seconds longer than comfortable, then turned to her terminal. Her fingers moved with the tired efficiency of someone who had typed 10,000 searches and expected nothing surprising from the 10,001st. I watched the reflection of the monitor in her glasses, green text, scrolling on a dark background. A system that probably ran on software older than my phone. "I have a marriage license," Pauline said. "Filed October 14th. 3 years ago. Richardson, Jenna Lee, to Monroe, Darnell Tyrese." Beside me, Hattie's hand found the edge of the counter and held on. I did not look at her face. I looked at the screen reflection and waited. "The name change petition," Pauline continued, tapping a second query, "was filed 11 months later. Richardson, Jenna Lee, petitioning to restore maiden name following dissolution of marriage." She paused. "The dissolution was filed in Fulton County, Georgia. Atlanta jurisdiction. Can I get certified copies of both?" Hattie's voice was steady, but her knuckles on the counter edge were pale. $5 each. Cash or card. Hattie paid $10 in single smooth flat. The way a woman pays who has been saving for exactly this purchase. Pauline disappeared into a back room. The fluorescent tube flickered. I counted 12 flickers before Hattie spoke. "She married my boy." The words came out like stones dropped into still water. "She married Darnell, took what she could, filed the violence complaint, and when he died, she dissolved the marriage and took her name back. Clean. Like she was never there." I reached for her arm. She let me hold it. "And then she came to Savannah," I said, "and became someone new." Not someone new. The same someone. Just a different name on the mailbox. Pauline returned with 2 certified copies in manila envelopes. I opened the marriage license first. The names were typed in county standard font: Jenna Lee Richardson and Darnell Tyrese Monroe. Date of ceremony: October 14. 3 years ago. Officiant: a Chatham County magistrate. Witnesses: 2 names I did not recognize, but it was the bride's signature at the bottom that stopped my breath, the same slanted J, the same elongated loop on the H, the same pen pressure I had seen on Jenna Weston's signature inside Marcus's bungalow on a framed marriage certificate hanging above the living room console. The name change petition confirmed the rest. 11 months after marrying Darnell, Jenna Richardson petitioned to restore her maiden name. The petition cited dissolution of marriage due to irreconcilable differences. No mention of a death. No mention of a bridge. No mention of a 31-year-old man who stopped calling his mother on a Tuesday night. I photographed both documents, front and back, then slid them into the folder I had brought from home, the red folder, the one Gerald used for tax returns he considered non-negotiable. The name bridge was complete. Darnell's wife was Jenna Richardson. Was Jenna Weston? Was the woman sleeping 10 miles away in my son's bed? We sat in Hattie's truck for a long time. The parking meter ticked. A pigeon landed on the hood and stared at us with the blank authority of something that had no opinion about human suffering. 3 gaps, I said. echoing my war room list. The name bridge is closed. 2 left. The witness, Hattie said. And the clock. 8 days. Hattie started the engine. Then let's talk about Brenda Hollins. I had read the scripted text messages on Jenna's laptop. Brenda's lines rehearsed, her responses timed, her language too clean for a real friend, recounting real fear. Brenda was either a co-conspirator or a puppet. If she was a puppet, she might cut her strings. If she was a co-conspirator, she might cut ours. Do you know where she lives? I asked. Hattie pulled away from the meter. 41 minutes. I clocked it last Thursday. Of course she had. Brenda Hollins lived in a duplex on the east side of Pooler, the kind of neighborhood where lawn ornaments outnumbered trees and every third mailbox had a package theft camera bolted to the post. Hattie parked 2 houses down, behind a landscaping trailer, and cut the engine. We sat. I studied the duplex. The left unit had a cracked window patched with packing tape and a welcome mat that said, "Bless this mess." The right unit, Brenda's, had drawn curtains, a wilted fern on the step, and no welcome mat at all. What do we know about her? I asked. Hattie opened her composition notebook to a blue-tabbed page. Brenda Elise Hollins. 34. Cosmetology license. Expired 2 years ago. Works part-time at a nail salon on Abercorn. Divorced. 1 daughter, age 6. She started receiving mail at the same time Jenna's packages picked up about 14 months ago. 3 envelopes from Castellano and Price, the Jacksonville law firm. 2 from a Charleston P.O. box I already flagged. She's in it, Carol. The question is how deep. I looked at the wilted fern. A woman who let a fern die on her front step was either too busy, too broke, or too broken to care about appearances. I had taught enough children to know that the parents who stopped watering the plants were usually the ones drowning themselves. I'll go alone, I said. Carol, if 2 strangers show up, she'll shut the door. 1 grandmother with a casserole dish stands a chance. I did not have a casserole dish. I had a Tupperware container of pimento cheese from my refrigerator and a sleeve of Ritz crackers from the glove box. Hattie stared at the offering, then at me, then nodded once. I walked to the door and knocked 3 times. 30 seconds. I knocked again. A child's voice inside said, "Mama, somebody's here." Footsteps. The door opened 4 inches, held by a chain lock. Brenda Hollins looked out at me with the specific exhaustion of a woman who expected the next knock to be a bill collector. She was thin. Not fashioning thin survival thin. Dark circles sat under brown eyes that were pretty in a way that tiredness could not entirely erase. Her hair was pulled back with a scrunchie that had seen better decades. "I'm Carol Weston," I said. Marcus Weston's mother. The door did not move, but her eyes did. They widened, then contracted, then dropped to the Tupperware in my hands, as if calculating whether pimento cheese could be a threat. "I brought something to share," I said. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want to talk." The chain slid free. She let me in. The living room was small, clean in the desperate way that poverty demands everything scrubbed but nothing new. A girl with box braids sat on a rug coloring a page from a princess book. She looked up, smiled the automatic smile children give to adults they have been taught to be polite to, and went back to coloring. "Lily," Brenda said, "go to your room for a bit, baby." Lily gathered her crayons without protest, which told me she was used to being sent away when adults needed the living room. That detail broke something in my teacher's heart. Brenda did not offer a seat, but she did not block the couch either. I sat. She stood by the kitchen doorway, with her arms folded, a woman, bracing for impact. "I know about the text messages," I said. "No preamble. No casserole pretense. The ones between you and Jenna. The scripted ones." Her arms tightened. "I don't know what you're... Brenda." I said her name the way I used to say. A student's name when they copied homework. And both of us knew it. Gently, without judgment, but without escape. I've read them, every line. The timestamps, the language, the way your responses match hers like a script, because they are a script. I'm not the police. I'm a mother trying to save her son. And I think you're a mother too. Her jaw clenched. She looked at the hallway where Lily had disappeared. When she looked back at me, the exhaustion in her eyes had shifted. Underneath it was fear not of me, but of something she had been carrying much longer than this conversation. She'll destroy me, Brenda whispered. She's already destroying you. Look at this apartment. Look at your face. When did you last sleep a full night? Brenda's arms unfolded. She walked to the couch and sat at the far end, leaving a cushion of distance between us. I opened the Tupperware, set a cracker on a napkin, and waited. It took 3 minutes. 3 minutes of silence while a 6-year-old colored princess is in the next room and traffic hummed outside a duplex in Pooler, Georgia. Then Brenda Hollins started talking. Jenna had found her through the nail salon 18 months ago. Jenna came in for acrylics, tipped $40 on a $30 service, and returned every 2 weeks. By the 3rd visit, she knew about Brenda's divorce, the custody fight, the overdue rent. By the 5th visit, she offered help. $2,000 cash, no strings. By the 7th visit, the strings appeared. Jenna needed a friend willing to testify, not in court. Just on paper, just text messages, confirming a story about an abusive husband. Easy work. Another $2,000. Then, another. How much total? I asked. Brenda closed her eyes. $11,000. Over 14 months. $11,000 to buy a witness, a fraction of the $1.8 million insurance policy, a rounding error on the $180,000 in fraudulent credit card debt, but a lifeline to a single mother in a duplex with a wilted fern. She told me no one would get hurt, Brenda said. She said Marcus was controlling, that she needed a safety net. I believed her at first. Then the scripts got specific dates, bruise locations, hospital details that never happened, and I knew. But by then, Lily's school was paid, and the landlord wasn't knocking anymore. I reached across the cushion and placed my hand over hers. Brenda, in 8 days, Jenna is going to file a domestic violence order, using those messages as evidence. After that, Marcus loses everything. And after Marcus, she'll disappear just like she did before. You'll be the one left holding the lie when investigators come asking. Her hand trembled under mine. What do you want me to do? Tell the truth. Not to me, to a lawyer named Richard Calloway. He'll protect you. And I'll make sure Lily is safe. The coloring sounds from the hallway had stopped. Lily was listening. Children always listen. Brenda looked at the hallway, then at me, and nodded a single, small, terrified nod that closed the second gap on my war room butcher paper. 2 down, 1 to go. 8 days. Richard Calloway's office occupied the 2nd floor of a converted cotton warehouse on Bay Street. The kind of building that Savannah preserved not out of nostalgia, but out of stubbornness. The stairs creaked in a pattern Richard once told Gerald sounded like the opening bars of Georgia on My Mind. Gerald had laughed. I never did figure out if Richard was joking. I arrived Tuesday morning at 8 sharp with Hattie beside me, and Brenda Hollins trailing 2 steps behind, clutching her purse strap with both hands as if it were a parachute cord. We had spent Monday night at my kitchen table, the war room, walking Brenda through every document, every timeline entry, every red circle on the butcher paper. She had cried twice, gone silent 3 times, and at one point stared at the $1.8 million insurance figure. So long, I thought she had stopped breathing. By midnight, she understood the architecture of what Jenna had built. And by 1 in the morning, she understood that her scripted text messages were a load-bearing wall in that architecture. Remove them, and the structure would crack. Richard met us at the door in a navy blazer and no tie, which for Richard Calloway was the equivalent of pajamas. He shook Hattie's hand, nodded at Brenda, and led us into a conference room with a mahogany table Gerald had helped him refinish 20 years ago. I ran my fingers along the edge, the way you touch something a dead man's hands once shaped. All right, Richard said, setting a yellow legal pad in front of him. Tell me everything. Start from the post office, I told him. Hattie filled the gaps. Brenda confirmed the parts she had lived. It took 90 minutes. Richard wrote in a shorthand only he could read, asked 11 questions, and did not interrupt once outside of those 11. When I finished, he set the pen down and leaned back. You have a strong, circumstantial case, he said. The name bridge, marriage license, name change petition, matching signatures, links the woman who defrauded Darnell Monroe to the woman currently living with Marcus. The financial trail credit cards in 4 states, the Coastal Living LLC shell, the siphoned $90,000. The insurance policy establishes motive and method. Brenda's testimony dismantles the domestic violence narrative before it's filed. And Lorraine Palmer's handwriting analysis on the Habersham forgery gives you physical evidence. He paused. I knew Richard's pauses. They were never empty. But you have 2 problems. First, Jenna has not yet committed the overt act. The DV filing is scheduled for Friday, but until she files it, she hasn't technically broken the law in a way that triggers immediate arrest. A prosecutor could argue she was planning, but planning alone without the filing, without an executed property transfer, without a completed insurance claim, puts you in a gray zone. And second? Hattie asked. Second, you have 7 days. A criminal investigation, even a fast one, takes longer than that. Subpoenas, depositions, forensic accounting. The DA's office moves on court time, not your timeline. The room went quiet. Through the window I could see a cargo ship sliding up the Savannah River, slow and enormous, the kind of thing that looked lazy until you realized it could flatten a dock without changing speed. So what do we do? Brenda's voice was small but present, which was more than I had expected. Richard opened a desk drawer and produced a business card. Lorraine Palmer, forensic document examiner. I called her last night. She can have a preliminary handwriting comparison, the Habersham forgery against the marriage license signature ready by Thursday. That's 2 days, I said. That's fast, Carol. She's doing me a favor. He placed a second card on the table. Denise Carver, investigative journalist, Savannah Morning News. She covered the Chatham County land fraud series 3 years ago. She understands financial crime. She has contacts in the DA's office. And she isn't afraid of a story that names names. I stared at the card. A reporter with subpoena-level access through public records requests, and a readership that creates pressure a prosecutor can't ignore. If Denise publishes before Friday, the DA's office will have to move not because of the evidence alone, but because the public will be watching. Hattie picked up Denise's card, turned it over, and placed it back on the table, aligned perfectly with the edge. A postal clerk's precision. What about Marcus? I asked. The question I had been swallowing for days. Richard's expression softened not much, because Richard Calloway's face had the emotional range of a courthouse wall, but enough. You'll have to tell him. Before the story breaks. Before the filing. Before any of it. He needs to hear it from you. Not from a headline. I nodded. I had known this. I had known it since the post office. Since the first package. Since Hattie grabbed my wrist. Knowing something and doing it are separated by a distance no map can measure. Here's what I recommend, Richard said, pulling the legal pad close again. Today, Tuesday, I draft a formal evidentiary summary and transmit it to the DA's office as a citizen complaint with supporting documentation. Tomorrow, Wednesday, Carol and Hattie meet with Denise Carver, provide copies of everything, and authorize her to investigate. Thursday, Lorraine delivers the handwriting comparison. Friday morning, if the DA has not acted, Denise publishes. He looked at each of us in turn. That gives Jenna 4 days to be caught and 0 days to file. Brenda exhaled. Hattie closed her notebook. I looked at the mahogany table and thought of Gerald sanding it on a Saturday afternoon, sawdust in his eyebrows, radio playing low, telling me, "Carol, the only thing stronger than oak is a woman who won't quit." He had been talking about the table. He had also been talking about me. "Do it," I said. Richard picked up his phone. "Lorraine? It's Richard. We're moving. I'm sending the documents this afternoon." He hung up and looked at me. "Now go home and figure out how to tell your son his wife is a ghost." I stood. My knees protested. 62 years of standing in front of classrooms and kneeling beside garden beds had left their invoice in my joints. But my spine was straight, and my hands were steady. And somewhere on Habersham Street, a magnolia tree Gerald planted was still standing because the roots were deep enough to hold. 7 days. A team of 5. One ghost to catch. I called Marcus at 6 in the evening and asked him to come for dinner. Just him. I said I was making shrimp and grits, Gerald's recipe, the one with the smoked Gouda and the andouille from Parker's on Drayton. Marcus never refused that meal. No, Weston ever had. He arrived at 7:15. Still in his project manager khakis, smelling of drywall dust and the cedar cologne Jenna had bought him for his birthday. He kissed my cheek, dropped his keys on the counter, the way Gerald used to, and opened the refrigerator for a beer before I could say a word. For a moment, I watched him. 31, broad-heasured, easy laugh, the same forehead as his father. And I wanted to lock the red folder in Gerald's cabinet and never open it. I wanted to let him eat shrimp and grits and drive home to a wife who loved him and live the life he believed he was living. But the life he believed he was living was a forgery, and forgeries do not hold. We ate. I let him talk. He told me about a renovation project on Tybee Island, a client who wanted exposed brick in a bathroom that had no brick, a coworker who kept microwaving fish in the break room. Normal things. Safe things. The kind of things a son tells his mother when he thinks the world is in order. I cleared the plates. I poured him a second beer and myself a glass of water. Then I sat across from him at the pine table, the war room, though he did not know it yet, and said, "Marcus, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen all the way through before you speak." His smile faded. Not because he suspected anything he couldn't have, but because he recognized the tone. It was the same tone I had used when I told him Gerald was gone, a voice that arrives from a place below the chest where mothers store the things they hope they'll never have to say. "Mom, what's wrong?" I opened the red folder. I started with the packages. 5 parcels addressed to Jenna Weston at his address, 4 of which carried a second name, Jenna Richardson. I showed him the photocopies. He frowned, picked up the passport copy and said, "This has to be a mistake. Maybe an old ID she never updated. Her birthplace is listed as Jacksonville, Florida," I said. "She told us she was born in Atlanta." The frown deepened. He set the passport down and looked at the next document, the Miami condo deed under Coastal Living LLC. I explained the shell company, the 14 months of ownership, the price paid in cash siphoned from his savings in small automated transfers he had never noticed. I showed him the bank statements. His eyes moved across the numbers the way a man's eyes move across a car wreck, wanting to look away, unable to. $90,000, he said. Not a question. A measurement. The weight of something he was only beginning to lift. I showed him the credit cards. Jacksonville, Charleston, Birmingham, Atlanta. 4 accounts opened in his name, maxed to a combined $180,000, all signed with a version of his handwriting close enough to fool a bank, but not close enough to fool a mother who had watched him write his name since kindergarten. "I didn't open these," Marcus said. His voice had changed. The easy warmth was gone. What replaced it was flat, mechanical. A man running diagnostics on a system he just discovered was compromised. I did not stop. I could not. Stopping would give him room to build explanations. And explanations were what Jenna counted on. I showed him the life insurance policy, $1.8 million, purchased by Coastal Living LLC, listing Jenna Weston as sole beneficiary. I showed him the Habersham Street property transfer documents. The forged signature with the flat crossbar on the T, the sale price of $1.2 million for a house appraised at $2 million. His father's house. The house Gerald built with his hands over 14 months. Marcus put his beer down. He had not taken a sip since I opened the folder. I showed him the fabricated abuse diary, 6 months of entries in steady handwriting describing violence that never happened. I showed him the bruise photographs made with drugstore makeup. I showed him the scripted text messages between Jenna and Brenda Hollins. Each line choreographed, each timestamp planted, and I told him about the domestic violence filing scheduled for Friday. The restraining order that would freeze his accounts, bar him from his home, and brand him an abuser in a public record. She's leaving Saturday, I said. On a way ticket. Savannah. To Miami. To Costa Rica. Under the name Jenna Richardson. Marcus did not move. He sat in Gerald's chair at Gerald's table in Gerald's kitchen and stared at the butcher paper I had forgotten to roll up the red timeline, the push pins, the taped documents, the 3 gaps with 2 now marked closed. He stared at it the way a man stares at an X-ray that shows something growing where nothing should be. How long have you known? He asked. 8 days. 8 days. He repeated it the way I had repeated $90,000. Measuring. I needed evidence before I came to you. If I'd told you on day 1, you would have confronted her, and she would have run. She's done it before, Marcus. She married a man named Darnell Monroe, right here in Chatham County. He died. She erased herself and started over. You were next. The kitchen was silent. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a mockingbird sang the 3-note phrase it had been practicing all week, oblivious to the gravity on this side of the window. Marcus stood. He walked to the counter, gripped the edge with both hands, and lowered his head. His shoulders rose and fell once a single, controlled breath, the kind of breath a man takes when he is deciding between breaking something and building something. When he turned around, his eyes were wet, but his jaw was set. What do you need me to do? He asked. 5 words. The same 5 words Gerald had said the night the school board tried to cut my classroom funding, and I came home ready to fight. What do you need me to do? Not why didn't you tell me sooner? Not are you sure? Not let me handle it. What do you need me to do? The Weston answer. The only answer that mattered. Tomorrow, I said. We meet the journalist. Denise Carver chose the meeting place, a corner booth, at a 24-hour diner on Victory Drive, where the coffee was bad enough that nobody lingered, and the vinyl seats were cracked in patterns that looked like river deltas. She was already seated when we arrived Wednesday morning at 9. Laptop open. Voice recorder centered on the table like a chess piece, waiting for the game to begin. She was younger than I expected. Mid-40s, sharp jaw, natural hair cropped close, silver rings on 3 fingers, and the posture of someone who had spent years leaning into conversations other people leaned away from. She wore no makeup. She did not need to. Her face did its work without decoration, the same way good prose does its work without adjectives. Richard Calloway had briefed her by phone the night before. She knew the outline. What she wanted was the architecture. Mrs. Weston, she said, not standing, not smiling, but not unfriendly either. I've covered 3 financial fraud cases in Chatham County. 2 went to trial. 1 got buried by a DA who didn't want the headline. I need to know which kind of story this is before I commit resources. It's the kind where a woman has killed before and is about to do it again, Hattie said from beside me. Denise looked at Hattie. The way reporters look at sources measuring reliability by the steadiness of the voice. Whatever she measured, it passed. She turned the recorder on. Start from the beginning. Every name, every date, every dollar. I had told this story 3 times now to Richard, to Brenda, to Marcus. Each telling sharpened it. The facts no longer trembled in my mouth. They arrived in order, clean and weighted, like bricks laid by a man who knew what he was building. I started with the post office. Hattie filled in the postal surveillance. Brenda, who sat at the far end of the booth with her hands wrapped around a coffee cup she never drank from, confirmed the recruitment, the payments, the scripts. Marcus sat beside me. He had not spoken since we entered the diner. He listened to his mother, described the dismantling of his life, the way a surgeon watches an X-ray clinical focus, masking personal stakes. When I reached the part about the $1.8 million insurance policy, his jaw tightened. When I described the forged signature on the Habersham house, his knuckles whitened around his water glass, but he did not interrupt. Gerald's discipline. Gerald's spine. Denise typed while we talked, her fingers striking keys with the rhythm of someone transcribing testimony she already believed but needed on record. She stopped us 4 times, once to clarify the Coastal Living LLC registration state, once to confirm the exact filing date on the name change petition, once to ask Brenda how payments were delivered, and once to verify the scheduled DV filing date. Friday, Brenda said. She told me to expect a call from her lawyer Thursday night to confirm my statement. Which lawyer? Castellano and Price. Jacksonville. Denise typed the name without reaction, but I saw her eyes narrow by a fraction, the tell of a journalist who recognized a thread she could pull. When we finished, Denise closed her laptop halfway and looked at each of us in sequence. Carol, Hattie, Brenda, Marcus. 4 people in a cracked vinyl booth whose combined evidence could either save a man's life or evaporate under legal scrutiny. Here's where we are, she said. You have documentary evidence, passport, condo deed, credit statements, bank records, marriage license, name change petition, forged signatures, scripted texts, insurance policy, and a flight itinerary. You have a forensic handwriting analysis due tomorrow from Lorraine Palmer. You have a cooperating witness. She glanced at Brenda. And you have a timeline that puts the overt act, the DV filing, 48 hours from now. She opened the laptop again. Here's what I can do. I can file a public records request today for every document associated with Coastal Living LLC in the state of Georgia. I can pull Castellano and Price's Barrio Association filings in Florida. I can cross-reference the Darnell Monroe death certificate with the marriage dissolution in Fulton County. And I can have a draft ready by Thursday night, timed to publish Friday morning, before the courthouse opens, before Jenna can file. And if the DA moves first? Marcus asked. His first words in 40 minutes. Then my article becomes confirmation, not revelation. Either way, it prints. Marcus nodded. One nod. The Weston nod. Denise turned to Brenda. Miss Hollins, I need to be direct. If this publishes, your name will be in it. Not as a defendant, as a cooperating witness. But Jenna will know. Of Lockett. Her lawyers will know. There may be blowback. Brenda looked at the table. I watched her fingers tighten around the coffee cup, the knuckles pressing white against brown skin. She was calculating not money this time, but cost. The cost of silence versus the cost of sound. I had seen the same calculation in parents who came to my classroom to confess their child was struggling at home. The ones who spoke always looked like Brenda did, now terrified and relieved in the same breath. My daughter is 6, Brenda said. Someday she'll Google my name. I'd rather she find a witness than a coward. Denise recorded that sentence without comment. But I noticed she typed it twice, once in her notes, and once in what I suspected was the draft already forming in her mind. Some quotes carry their own headline. We left the diner at 11. The morning had turned humid, the kind of Savannah heat that sits on your collarbone and refuses to leave. Hattie walked Brenda to her car. Marcus and I stood on the sidewalk, watching traffic pass on Victory Drive, delivery trucks, school buses, a city moving through an ordinary Wednesday, unaware that a story was being assembled in a diner booth that would reach further than any of us could predict. Mom, Marcus said. He was looking straight ahead, not at me. When this is over, I want to refinish Dad's table. The one in the kitchen. It's got water rings. I took his arm. Gerald would like that. Gerald would have already done it. We stood there for another minute. Then Marcus put on his sunglasses, kissed my forehead, and walked to his truck. He did not look back. He did not need to. He was a Weston, and Westons walk forward. Thursday. Lorraine's report. Denise's draft. 48 hours. Lorraine Palmer delivered her report at 4:17 p.m. on Thursday, 26 hours before the courthouse opened for Friday filings. She did not email it. She drove to Richard Calloway's office, set a 32-page document on the mahogany table, and said, "I've testified in 41 forgery cases. This is the clearest match I've seen in a decade." I was already seated. Hattie sat beside me. Marcus stood by the window with his arms crossed, watching the cargo ships on the river, the way a man watches things move when he cannot afford to stand still. Richard took the report, opened it to the summary page, and read aloud. The analysis compared 3 signature samples: the Habersham Street property transfer document, the Chatham County marriage license filed by Jenna Richardson 3 years ago, and a known exemplar of Marcus Weston's handwriting provided by Carol Weston. Lorraine's conclusion occupied a single paragraph that landed on the table like a verdict. The signature on the property transfer was not written by Marcus Weston. The pen pressure, letter spacing, baseline slant, and stroke sequencing were inconsistent with his exemplar across 14 measurable criteria. However, the same signature shared 11 points of similarity with the handwriting on the marriage license, specifically the slanted J, the elongated H-loop, the compressed sun terminal, and the flat cross-O bar on the T that I had noticed in my kitchen 8 days ago. Lorraine's professional opinion, stated with the caution of a woman who understood courtrooms, the Habersham forgery and the marriage license signature were produced by the same hand. Jenna's hand. Richard set the report down. "That's our physical evidence." His phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, then turned it toward us. A text from Denise Carver. "Draft done. 3,200 words. Publishing 6 a.m. Friday. Call me if anything changes." Nobody called her to change anything. The room shifted. Until that moment, the past 8 days had felt like building slow, deliberate, one brick on top of another, the way Gerald would have done it. Now the building was done, and the door was about to open, and what walked through it would not be something I could control. I looked at Marcus. He was still watching the river. "What happens tomorrow?" he asked without turning. Richard leaned forward. At 6 a.m., Denise's article goes live on the Savannah Morning News website and social feeds. It names Jenna Richardson, formerly Jenna Monroe, currently known as Jenna Weston. It details the Coastal Living LLC shell, the fraudulent credit accounts, the forged property transfer, the fabricated domestic violence evidence, the insurance policy, and the flight itinerary. It references Lorraine's handwriting analysis and Brenda Hollins's cooperating testimony. It connects the case to the death of Darnell Monroe. At 9:30, he continued, "I walk into the DA's office with the full evidentiary package: Lorraine's report, the certified marriage license, and name change petition, the bank records, the postal logs, Brenda's sworn statement, and the laptop screenshots. I've already spoken with Assistant DA Michelle Trent. She's expecting me. And Jenna?" Marcus's voice was level, but the question had edges. "If the DA moves fast and with a published article creating public pressure, a judge can issue a temporary restraining order against Jenna by mid-morning. Not the kind Jenna planned to file against you. The kind that freezes her accounts, flags her passport, and prevents her from boarding a Saturday flight. What if she runs tonight?" Hattie asked. The question nobody wanted to voice, but everybody had calculated. Richard nodded as if he had expected it. Denise considered that. She's not publishing a preview or teaser. No social media hints. The article goes live at 6 with no warning. Between now and 6 a.m., Jenna has no reason to suspect anything has changed. She's expecting Brenda's confirmation call tonight, the filing tomorrow, And the flight Saturday. Her schedule is intact. Then we keep it intact, I said. Brenda makes the call. Every head in the room turned to me. I understood why. I was asking Brenda to perform one more act in a script she had just agreed to abandon to call Jenna tonight. Confirm the Thursday night check you, and let the machine run on its own momentum until the article and the DA cut the power. She'll do it, Brenda said from the doorway. I had not heard her arrive. She stood with her purse over one shoulder and a look on her face. I recognized from 29 years of teaching the look of a student who had finally decided to turn in the paper she'd been hiding in her backpack. Scared. Resolved. Done pretending. I talked to her an hour ago, Brenda continued, stepping inside. Regular Thursday check-in. She asked if I was ready. I said yes. She said the lawyer would send final instructions by 9 tonight. I told her I'd be waiting. And you will be, Richard said. You'll receive the instructions. You'll acknowledge them. And you'll forward them directly to me and to Denise. Those instructions coming from Castellano and Price become the last piece of the chain. A law firm directing a witness to provide false testimony in a domestic violence proceeding. That's not circumstantial. That's criminal. Brenda sat down in the chair nearest the door, as if keeping her exit close was the only luxury she allowed herself. I caught her eye and mouthed 2 words. Thank you. She blinked once, which was enough. The room fell into a silence that felt different from every other silence of the past 8 days. It was not the silence of waiting or of fear. It was the silence before a detonation, the half-second after the fuse burns down and before the sound arrives. Everything was in place. The name bridge, the witness, the forensic report, the journalist, the lawyer, the DA, the forwarded instructions that would arrive by 9 o'clock tonight. I drove home at 6. The October sky over Savannah was bruised purple and gold, the kind of sunset that tourists photograph and locals barely notice, because beauty becomes invisible when you see it every day. I noticed it tonight. I pulled over on Drayton Street, rolled the window down, and watched the light die slowly over the rooftops. Tomorrow morning, my son's wife would wake up believing she had one more ordinary day before her escape. By the time she finished her coffee, 60,000 subscribers to the Savannah Morning News would know her name, all 3 of them. By noon, a judge would sign an order that grounded her flight. And by evening, if God and the Chatham County justice system cooperated, Jenna Richardson would understand what Hattie Monroe had understood for 4 years. That silence has an expiration date, and hers had just arrived. I rolled the window up and drove home to wait for 9 o'clock. The instructions arrived at 9:04 p.m. A single email from Castellano and Price to Brenda Hollins. Subject line: Final preparation Weston matter. 4 paragraphs directing Brenda to appear at the Chatham County Courthouse at 9:30 a.m. Friday. Present her identification and provide a sworn statement corroborating 6 specific incidents of domestic violence, dates, locations, injuries, none of which had ever occurred. The email closed with a reminder that her compensation of $3,000 would be wired upon completion of the filing. Brenda forwarded it to Richard Calloway at 9:06. Richard forwarded it to Denise Carver at 9:08. By 9:12 p.m., on a Thursday night in October, the last stone was in place. I did not sleep. I sat in Gerald's chair in the kitchen with the war room spread before me, the butcher paper, the red circles, the taped documents, the 3 gaps now all marked closed, and I drank chamomile tea that tasted like nothing because my body had forgotten how to register anything smaller than dread. At 4 a.m., I showered. At 4:30 I dressed in the navy cardigan Gerald had bought me for our 30th anniversary, the one I wore to parent Stawtacker conferences when I needed to feel armored but approachable. At 5 a.m., Marcus pulled into the driveway. He did not honk. He did not text. He sat in his truck with the headlights off and waited for me the way Gerald used to wait. Patient, present, certain. We drove downtown in silence. The streets were empty, except for delivery vans, and a single jogger whose reflective vest blinked in the dark like a heartbeat. Hattie met us at the corner of Bull and Broughton with 2 cups of gas station coffee and a calm that I envied and suspected was manufactured. Brenda arrived at 5. 45 inches, a blouse I had never seen pressed. Buttoned to the collar. Chosen by a woman who understood that today she would be photographed. At 6 a.m., Denise Carver's article went live. The headline read, "Savannah woman linked to identity fraud, forged property sales, and death of former husband." Beneath it, 3,200 words that mapped every thread we had pulled over 9 days, the 2 names, the shell company, the siphoned savings, the forged signatures, the fabricated abuse diary, the insurance policy, the scripted witness, the Costa Rica ticket, and the death of Darnell Monroe. Lorraine Palmer's handwriting analysis was cited by name. Brenda Hollins was identified as a cooperating witness. Castellano and Price's email, received 12 hours earlier, was quoted verbatim. By 6:20, the article had 400 shares. By 6:45, it had 2,000. By 7, when Richard Calloway walked through the doors of the DA's office carrying a banker's box of evidence, the Savannah Morning News comment section had become a live wire of outrage, sympathy, and the particular fury that arises when strangers recognize a predator they almost married, almost trusted, almost lost everything to. I know what happened next because Richard told me, and because Denise live-in tweeted the courthouse steps, and because Marcus stood beside me on the sidewalk across from the building and watched it unfold in real time on his phone screen, the same screen where, 3 weeks ago, he had shown me a photograph of Jenna laughing at a rooftop bar. Her head on his shoulder, her eyes bright with a warmth I now understood was rehearsed. At 7:35 a.m., Assistant DA Michelle Trent filed an emergency motion. At 8:10, Judge Harold Pemberton signed a temporary restraining order freezing all accounts associated with Jenna Weston, Jenna Richardson, and Coastal Living LLC. At 8:22, the order was transmitted to TSA and flagged against the Jenna Richardson passport. The Delta flight to Miami, scheduled for Saturday morning, would depart without her. At 9:15 minutes before Brenda was supposed to walk into the courthouse and swear to lies, 2 Chatham County detectives arrived at Marcus's bungalow in Ardsley Park. Jenna answered the door in a silk robe with a coffee cup in her hand and a smile that did not survive the first sentence. They arrested her on charges of identity fraud, forgery, insurance fraud, and conspiracy to file a false judicial report. She did not resist. She did not speak. She looked past the detectives at the magnolia tree in the front yard, and for a moment I imagined she was calculating whether the tree was an asset she had forgotten to liquidate. Marcus did not watch the arrest. He had asked not to. He stayed with me on the sidewalk, his back to the bungalow, his eyes on the river at the end of the street. I held his arm. He let me. By Friday afternoon, the story had been picked up by the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, the Jacksonville Times-Union, and 3 national wire services. By Saturday, it had 1.2 million reads. Denise Carver received a call from a woman in Birmingham who recognized the pattern, a man she had married 6 years ago who had opened credit cards in her name and vanished. Then a call from Charleston, then Jacksonville. The web Jenna had woven was wider than Savannah, and it was unraveling in public. On Sunday morning, I drove to Habersham Street. The restraining order had halted the property transfer. Gerald's house stood where it had always stood. White clapboard, cypress porch rails, a magnolia tree that reached 40 feet into a sky scrubbed clean by overnight rain. I parked at the curb and sat for a while. Marcus arrived 20 minutes later with a sanding block and a can of wood stain. He walked up the porch steps, knelt beside the railing. Gerald had rebuilt twice and began to sand. The sound was steady and rhythmic. The whisper of rough becoming smooth, of damage being repaired, not by erasing it, but by working through it. Hattie came at noon with a plate of biscuits and a composition notebook. A new one. Green cover. No red dots. She set it on the porch swing and said, "For the next chapter." Whichever one it is. Brenda sent a photograph that evening. Lily, box braids and gap-toothed grin, holding a handmade card that said, "Thank you, Mrs. Carol," in purple crayon. I pinned it to the refrigerator next to Gerald's favorite snapshot, the two of us on Tybee Island, salt in our hair, squinting into a sun that had not yet learned how to set. I poured a glass of sweet tea, walked to the back porch, and looked at the garden where Gerald's roses were still blooming because I had never stopped watering them. The October air was warm. Somewhere down the block, a mockingbird sang its three-note phrase, the same one it had been practicing all week. And this time I listened. Some houses hold secrets. Ours held something stronger, a family that refused to fall, a stranger who refused to stay silent, and a mother who learned, at 62, that the most dangerous thing in the world is not a woman with two names. It is a woman with none who decides to reclaim hers. My name is Carol Weston. I am a retired third-grade teacher from Savannah, Georgia. And this is the story of how I saved my son.